All right. So besides, as we said, after it became illegal to express discriminatory preferences in job advertisements, it got a little bit harder to find very direct evidence for discrimination. People have anecdotes, but anecdotes are not taken very seriously by researchers because they're hard to verify and also they're hard to quantify. So this audit evidence is something kind of close to the kind of evidence you'd get from anecdotes, but done in a way that's a little bit more verifiable. So this is a test for discrimination in hiring, and here's how it generally works. Okay, so the researchers send out matched testers to apply for jobs in person. Because the jobs are in person, they're usually entry-level jobs that don't require a very high level of education. Just because, especially now, there's almost all jobs that require higher education would be applied for online. But entry-level jobs still, to some extent, are face-to-face applications. Um, then the testers are matched into groups by observable traits. So before they send them out, they match them into groups by observable traits. Sometimes pairs and sometimes more than pair, depending on how many different traits how many different things they want to test. Okay, so they're matched by observable traits. So they'll pick people that are about the same height, and they'll have them dressed in a way that they're roughly the same in terms of not like looking like twins and something ridiculous, but that they're roughly the same in terms of their level of professional look kind of thing. They're not going to get one person with long unkempt hair and another person with a short, clean cut kind of look. So they're going to try to match them on these kind of things. They'll also match them on looks. So they generally actually will use some kind of objective standard to quantify people's attractiveness, and they'll try to match them on that. So it's not some kind of attractiveness difference or something else. And then they allow the testers just to differ on one or two variables. So usually they differ on race or gender, okay, and sometimes others, but those are the main two that have been done. Um, and then the second thing is they're then trained to minimize any differences in behavior so they're trained to what are they going to do, who are they going to approach who are they going to approach when they enter the business, what are they going to say, and they kind of rehearse these things and practice them kind of like an actor, so that their difference in behavior will be relatively small, although we'll see later on that's still a little bit of a criticism. So then they then go and apply for the same jobs. So they go in the same businesses, and they randomize the order, and they separate themselves so that in general they don't overlap with each other. Um, and then they can see and they do this with a large number of jobs, and they also get enough groups of testers so that it doesn't depend on any individual pair. Um, and then they can see if the employers respond differently or not, right? So the general things that they use in some of these studies, they use things like callbacks. Do they get a callback? Do they get an interview offer? Sometimes they get a job offer on the spot, so they can use that. And also sometimes they get a job offer with a specific salary, right? So they look at all these things. Just incidentally, if you're interested in this, this has also been done with rental and loan applications, so rental housing, borrowing money, and it's also been done with purchasing cars. Okay, and so if you're interested in this, some of you might be interested in doing this for your research project because there's tons of literature in this area. Um, and again, it would be a good looking at something we haven't done in this class, like the consumer market or rental or housing market, would be a really cool research project because it would add to your learning and it would go beyond what you've done in the course. Okay, so in this, I just want to talk about a specific research project. So this research was done in, I believe the paper was published in 2009. It was done in New York City, and they divided people into trios, and they were black, white, and Latino testers in trios, right? And they were matched on other characteristics. And the graph at the right shows what percentage got a positive response. So positive response, I believe, was they either got a call back from the employer to schedule an interview, or they got a job offer on the spot. Okay, and so we can see there was a clear racial difference. And again, these people were matched on all these other characteristics. I believe all of the testers were college students from New York area colleges. I don't remember specifically which college. So basically, just quantifying the numbers on the right, you can see the average white tester was twice as likely as the average black tester to get a callback or a job offer. So that means black applicants got 50% less positive responses, right? So the huge difference. So on the right, it shows, well, 31% of the time, the white applicants got positive responses and only 15% of the time for Black applicants. Also, you can see there was a difference between white and Latino as well, but the difference was less stark. So it was about 20% less positive responses than white applicants. At the bottom is the names of the authors. And again, this was published in 2009. I'll put information about it in the learning unit. So this is pretty consistent with lots of other studies. So lots of studies show racial discrimination in hiring in these kind of audit studies, and lots of studies show more discrimination against African Americans than Latinos, but they show discrimination against both groups. Okay, so this evidence is fairly consistent, not the exact numbers, but the overall theme is fairly consistent with research I've seen in other projects. Just to go a little bit more about this, more details. The Black applicants and to some extent Latino applicants were also more likely to be so-called down-channeled, right? So they were channeled down into jobs that were lower level than the one they applied for. And often these jobs were also behind-the-scenes jobs. Okay, so for example, you apply to be a server and they tell you the server job is full, but you can be a dishwasher. Or you apply for a sales job and they tell you the sales job is not available anymore, but they need a stock clerk. Okay, so this was more likely to happen. In fact, it happened in quite a few cases for Black applicants and several for Latino applicants. For the white applicants, I believe, if I remember the paper right, it only happened one time. Okay, so it wasn't very common for white applicants. In fact, for white applicants, it was many cases, several cases was the opposite. And again, their supposed, on their fake resumes, their supposed level of experience and skills was similar, okay, was about the same. So for the white applicants, they were much more likely to be up-channeled. So they were up, they got pushed up to jobs they hadn't applied for. So somebody applies for a server position and they offer you a manager position, okay, this kind of thing. And again, that only happened a handful of times to Latino applicants and barely at all for the Black applicants. So they're much more likely to be put up to things that they weren't qualified for. This same research paper did something interesting. They included a group of testers who, one of them, the white applicant from that group, were represented as if they had a felony prison record. So they didn't actually have a felony prison record, but when asked about their arrest record, they said that they had a felony conviction and had served, I believe the paper said, served 18 months for a felony drug conviction. The Black and Hispanic testers in this same trio had clean records. Okay, and the shocking kind of part of this paper was actually the white tester with a recent felony prison record received roughly the same treatment as the Black and Hispanic testers, right? So this kind of neutralized the positive effect they got, but they weren't treated worse. In fact, it wasn't statistically significant, but they actually got slightly more callbacks, but it was basically the same from a statistical point of view. So anyways, this was quite a shocking result of this paper, that prison record it took a prison record to neutralize the racial advantage that whites had in this job application process. So one of the things about this is this could do a lot to explain partly the wage gap, but a big part of it could be explaining this gap in unemployment. Okay, and we'll come back and look at some evidence for this next week. But if the job search process, if you have to apply to more jobs to get a positive offer, then it would be more likely for a group to end up unemployed. It's also more likely they'd be willing to accept lower paying jobs, again, because of the difficulty of job search. So this evidence lines up pretty closely with that idea about the job search process then affecting people's choices. So again, this is just one example. There's been many other studies done in the U.S. and other countries as well, and they've found similar results. So you're welcome to look more deeply into this. One suggestion on page 275 of your textbook, there's several audit studies that are talked about related to gender discrimination, and you can take a look at those on your own. There's a few criticisms of this technique. Okay, and so what are those criticisms? So the two that you can kind of think about it for yourself. You might want to pause before you go on. But the two main criticisms is, one, can you really match people perfectly? Okay, so even if you match people perfectly, they're the same height and similar length hair and everything else, there still may be small differences in the way that they behave that employers take as a cue related to their ability to do the job. And it may be some difference that the tester does something different and the employers pick it up. Okay, and so that's a common criticism of this, that it may be that there's some difference that's going on that's not being picked up. And you can take this as far as you want to take it, okay? But that's a common criticism of these studies. The second criticism is that it's possible people will behave differently because they're taking part in an experiment. This is known as the Hawthorne effect. So they're taking part in an experiment, and they kind of probably they expect that they're going to find discrimination. And so this might affect people's behavior because they're taking part in an experiment aimed at measuring discrimination. So people from the minority group may behave a little differently if they believe that they're going to be discriminated against in this experiment. And the fact that they're explicitly told they're in an experiment about discrimination may affect their behavior. In my opinion, these two criticisms, while maybe having a little bit of validity, still don't mitigate the fact that this audit technique has been done over and over and over in many different places and found clear, strong evidence of racial discrimination. One limit of this technique, it's only useful at the initial stage. So you can't test like things like promotion and unequal pay raises because people are not really going to take the jobs. They're just testing the market. So it's really only about the job search process, and it can't do a very good job of going beyond that.